In this brief tutorial, we're going to show you how to add authorizations to the kid's profile in the system, in the WebABA system. The authorizations are attached to the children's profile, so they're available in the clients module. Once you go to the clients and retrieve your children, one of the ways to view the authorizations that are already entered into the system and are attached to the kid's profile are under auth, all auth column icon. Once you retrieve your children in the clients module, their most basic info is displayed in the middle grid view, in the middle of the screen, and with their name, phone number, date of birth. One of the columns indicate all auths, and there is an icon. So if you want to look at the authorizations that are attached, you simply click on the icon and you are presented with all episode slash authorization pop-up window, which displays the authorization that is already entered for this kit. The information includes a brief description, the onset date, which is the start date, the end date if there is one, if the case is closed, primary insurance, and the treatment type. You may add new authorization by using the Add New Auth action button at the bottom of the pop-up window. That's one way to look at the authorizations that are already entered and add new authorizations if you need to do that. If you're already inside the kid's profile, you also have the authorization buttons readily available. Let's look at this kit. You click anywhere on that row for a particular child, and the system takes you to the demographics screen of the kit. No matter which tab you're looking at on top, if it's biographic or treatment location, you always get these two buttons: add new authorization, all existing authorization. So you have the authorization buttons also available if you are already inside a kid's profile. It is recommended that before you add any new authorization, you always view the authorizations that are already available to make sure that you're not entering duplicate authorizations. If you already entered the authorization, it's suggested that you view authorizations to avoid any duplicates. You could follow the same procedure, click Add New Auth, or you simply click on Add New Auth if you're sure that the kid does not have any authorizations associated with his profile or her profile. Before we start entering the new authorization, the kid has to have a complete basic demographic info, and by that we mean their first name, last name, date of birth, and gender, in addition to a complete address. Otherwise, these buttons are deactivated and you will not be able to add new authorization. Let's start adding authorization for this kit. Again, we click all existing auth. There is no authorization added, so we click add new authorization and the screen for authorization is displayed. Before we start entering authorization, you need to know that it's a three-step process, it's a threefold process. Once you attempt to enter authorization, the system requires you first to create an episode, which is where we are right now. Once the episode is entered and completed in the system, you will be prompted to enter the authorization, which is the next tab right next to episode up here on the upper left hand corner under the episode module. And the last step is adding the activities that are authorized under that authorization. So we start the first step of the process, which is the episode creation. On this screen, there are two fields that are required. One is the description, the other is the onset date. Description usually refers to the most descriptive feature of the authorization episode, where you don't have to drill down and is readily available and displayed when you click on the very first screen to view authorizations. So normally it is the name of the funding source with the start and end date. In this case, let's say we are adding this authorization under the funding source of the Cigna, and the start date is 10/1/2014, and end date is 10/1/2015. Once the description is completed, you put the onset date, which is the date that the kid was diagnosed with the condition. In most cases, is the authorization start date if you don't have that diagnosis date available. In this case, we have indicated is October 1st. We input that information into the system. On the onset date field, we have fulfilled the requirement on the episode module to move forward by creating the episode. Uh, the primary diagnosis is already inputted for you. If you need to change that, you may go ahead and do that. That is not required by the system. And if there is any note associated with it, with this episode, you may enter it here under the notes section. Once you have entered the description and onset date, you're good to go, and you click on create save episode. The system informs you that the episode is created. Please create authorization, and that's when we move to the authorization tab. We click on the authorization. There is nothing to be done here except clicking on add new authorization action button, and that activates the authorization screen. This is the second step throughout the process. It's basically a form. You fill out the form as we indicated on the episode form. The funding source is Cigna, so that is selected here. The treatment type, behavior therapy, is already inputted. If it's a multidisciplinary practice, you select the corresponding treatment type. If it's speech therapy or physical therapy, we keep behavior therapy, which is the default. There are two checkboxes on the upper right hand corner of the authorization screen. The first one is by default checked for you, and it's indicating that this is a primary authorization. The second checkbox is not checked, is not selected, and we recommend that you do not check that. This checkbox indicates do not validate visit against this authorization, which means there are safeguards in the system that warns the users if you are scheduling sessions prior to the start date of the authorization or after the end date of the authorization. So the system keeps users informed with those safeguards in case the schedulers are violating them. So it's recommended that you never touch this deselected checkbox and you keep them as deselected. The authorization number is required. You enter that here on this field. The UCI or insurance ID field is also required. If there is one available for private payers, you enter them here. If it's a regional center that does not provide with UCI code, you may use this squiggly, or what we refer to in computer jargon as tilde, to allow to for the system to allow you to move forward. So either a UCI number or tilde if you don't have one. In this case, we do have a UCI number because it's a Cigna Behavioral Health. Any co-pays or deductibles are entered into these fields, and start date and end date for the authorization are entered into the start date and end date. In this case, as we entered 10/1/2014 on the episode form, we duplicate that info here. It is important to remember that no services can be rendered, no activities can be entered into the system prior to the start date. So it is important to make sure that your episode start date and authorization start date are inputted into the system accurately. The end date is 10/1/2015. And last but not least, you select the supervisor who manages this case. We select the supervisor, and we click on save, add details. The system informs you that the authorization is added, and activity screen is uploaded at the bottom portion of the screen. Uh, This is where the third step of the authorization process starts. You created the episode on the first step. You entered the detailed information for authorization on the second step, and now you are prompted to enter the activities that are associated with the authorization. Let's say we have a one-on-one direct behavior therapy authorized for this authorization. If there are any sub activities in your practice entered for this direct behavior therapy for this particular activity, it is displayed in a drop down menu next to the activity field. Let's say this is BCBA. The start date and end date are looking at these two fields in the authorization detail form, so it is auto-populated for you. In case the start or end date is different from for this particular activity is different from what is indicated for the authorization, you have the option of changing that. That is normally not the case, but if in case it is different, you may change the dates. These are not set in stone. Please remember that the authorization start date here cannot be prior to the date that you input into the authorization start date up there, the activity start date. Any CPT code associated with this activity is entered here. You select one of the CPT codes that is available in the system. Billed per, you have the option of 15 minutes, hours per unit or per session. For this example, let's say it's per units of 15 minutes and each is $31.25. This is the billing rate. That is a required field. If you have already entered a billing rate for this activity for that payer, right here in this case Cigna, you may use this link where it says get rate, which auto-populates these two fields for you. In this case, since this is the first time we're entering this authorization, we don't use this automated feature and we enter it manually. At the bottom portion, maximum frequency allowed. The system allows you to enter the scope of these activities within the authorization, the limits, the maximum limits. In this case, we've selected per unit, so I am uh, displayed with units or amount. Amount refers to the dollar value. Units refers to the time units. I select units, let's say per month, and 200 units per month is the maximum allowed frequency for this activity. And if there is other restrictions, you still have the option of enter it here. Let's say you have 200 units per month for every 15 minutes, which makes it around 40. And let's say a total of, for the total authorization of 1,200 units. So you have that option of compound restrictions on a particular activity that is associated with the authorization. Any notes that is um, uh, applicable or associated with this activity and you need to refer to it later on can be entered under the notes section. So to recap, we created the episode, we created the authorization info on the authorization form on the upper portion of the screen, and once we saved it, we were presented with the activity. We entered the activity and the limit of maximum frequency allowed for the authorization, and we're ready to submit. We click on the save button, and the very first activity is added for this authorization. Authorization number 2136254 has this activity associated with it. If in case you've made a mistake and you need to change any information regarding this activity that you have entered, you have the option of editing or deleting it. If this activity is not associated with any sessions, you have the option of deleting it. Once this activity has been used in a session, then the delete option will not be available to you. The system will not allow you to delete it, but you still have the ability to edit it by clicking on the edit button, and you may change any information such as authorization start date, authorization end date, or CPT code, or the frequency or the billing rate. Now that we have added the first activity, we continue with the process and start adding and add more activities by clicking add activities. In this case, let's have supervision. We have a supervision also authorized for this activity. Again, start date and end date is auto-populated for you from the authorization info. You select the CPT code in the same manner. Let's say this is hours. The supervision is hours, and it's hourly rate of $125. You enter that information, and the maximum allowed is, let's say, um, I don't know, 4 hours per month, and total number of hours for the duration of the authorization we can have, since it's for a year and 4 hours a month, uh, let's say 50 hours. We're not allowed to go beyond 50 hours. Once that information is entered, you can save. And the second activity is also uploaded in the system. In the same manner, I have the option of editing it if I need to change any information, and the activity screen opens up, and it allows me to um, edit any information that needs to be modified. But we don't need to do that at this point. This pretty much wraps up our authorization entry into the system for a kid in the WebABA application. To recap, it's a three-step process. You enter an episode, which is the description and the onset date. Once that is completed, the system prompts you to enter the authorization info. You create the authorization info by filling out the form on the top portion of the screen and saving that information. And once this second step is completed, you'll be prompted to enter the activities that are associated with that authorization.